Yeah, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for staying for the session. Might be the last session of the day for the track D, and I apologize sincerely from bottom of my heart for not being there in presence. That would have been wonderful, and I miss that. At least I will look forward for next year to be there for sure. So yeah, I'd like to get started and get going. So a quick, recap or quick frame for the next 40 minutes. Yeah, I'm not going to give you a tour of every shiny GenAI demo because I know your feeds are full of those these days. So what I want to do is walk you through that it actually takes to put a generative AI into production in the most regulated and highest stakes data environment we have. That's healthcare. So, start with this. Start with why this matters most, because why the conversation has shifted from can it work to how fast can we ship it safely. So then we will go deep on our real use cases running today, look under the hood at the architecture and engineering discipline that keep them honest, and finish with the trust, privacy, fairness, governance, without which none of these is basically allowed to leave the lab. A note on the title slide is it's as you can see, it's empowering healthcare transformation. Isn't marketing copy neither for me or for my organization. It's more like healthcare is where I've spent majority of my career in the last decade, and I genuinely believe this technology will reshape how care is delivered, paid for, and experienced if we build it the right way. So the if is what we are going to talk mostly about. So I'll keep the last few minutes for any questions, and yeah, especially the skeptical questions, the ones from the people who have been burned by the AI hype before, right? So I think those are the most useful conversations for everyone in the room. So let's get started. So I would give a quick intro about myself and the background a little bit. So quick context on basically who's talking to you, so you can calibrate. So as earlier introduction, I'm a staff software engineer focused on data and AI platforms for healthcare. So I've spent, as I mentioned, majority of my space in the last decade in this area, in the trenches with the claims data, EHR feeds, and the messy but critical and retrieval pipelines, and other stuffs and so on. Coming to Gen and LLMs, I worked up majorly on the production side, which is unglamorous but critical. The retrieval pipelines, evil suits, agentic systems that have to behave well at 3 in the morning when no one is watching, and the healthcare data, claim, CHR, FHR, ICD-10, HCPS, SCC coding, and so on. So if you have worked with any of these, each is its own swamp. Combining them into something coherent is most of the actual job. And cloud scale is another thing. At cloud scale, at population scale, you stop thinking about a single patient and start thinking about pipelines that run reliably across 100 million lives every day without surprises. And the last one, the responsible AI. So it's a bad auditing like HIPAA, your governance, not a side project. I would say a release blocker. We'll come back to it. Why I'm telling you this is because the lessons in this talk weren't one from a whiteboard. They came from the launches that worked, launches that didn't, a lot of postmortems with clinicians and product folks. So the opinions are mine. Some of them might be wrong, and you will get to push back at the end. So moving on, the opportunity, right? Before we talk about the solutions, let me ground us in the problem. So basically, the healthcare runs on data. Roughly 30% of the data on the planet is healthcare data. Like unimaginably, it's like $3 trillion a year flow through the US system, and yet most of that intelligence never reaches the bedside. Look at those four numbers. The first three are the supply side. 30% of the world's data, 3 trillion is spent. 80% of clinical information lives in unstructured trust, progress notes, digital summaries, faxes, scanned PDF. That's a staggering inventory. Now, the fourth number, less than 5% of those insights actually reach the clinician at the moment of the decision. 5%, that's the demand side gap, and it's the gap this whole field is trying to close. Here is the hard claim. We don't have a data shortage in the healthcare. Anyone who has ever requested a medical records know this. We have an intelligence delivery problem. The data is there and it's just struck in PDFs, in fax machines, in fields the EHR vendor designed for billing rather than clinical reasoning, in proprietary soils and that don't talk to each other. So this is why generative AI matters here in a way it doesn't in some other industries. The 80% unstructured isn't a curiosity, it's a gold mine. The same models that can summarize a meeting can read a discharge summary, extract HCC eligible conditions, and surface them in time to act. So, yeah, hold this gap in your head as we go through the use cases. So, yeah, now why now, right? The Gen A inflection point. So why is everyone, including a very conservative payers and providers, moving on to onto this right now? Three thresholds crossed at the same time. First is capability. Frontier models can reason across modalities, follow tools, and drown answers in the sources we actually trust. Formularies, a policy PDF, the chart itself. Instead of making things up from training data, 18 months ago, a model that could read a fax wasn't something I would put in a critical workflow. Today, it's table stakes. So second is cost. Token economics, token economics have fallen by an order of magnitude in 24 months. That sounds like a finance comment, but it has profound product implications. When you can afford inference on every chart, every claim, every member interaction, you stop building intelligent batch and start building intelligent everywhere. So, like population scale, GenAI was fantasy at 2023 prices. It's a roadmap item at 2026 prices. So, the third is trust. The guardrails ecosystem grew up, evaluation frameworks, prompt injection defenses, PHI tokenization, audit trails, model cards. 2 years ago, putting a generative AI system through a HIPAA review was a 6 month adventure. Today, the patterns are more documented and the contracts are templated, and your security system team has probably already approved a vendor. So the line at the bottom is the actual insight. For the first time, healthcare organizations can deploy intelligence systems without choosing between accuracy, affordability, and compliance. So until now, you got two of the three window opening. Today is when you can have all three at once. So programs rejected on cost or risk in 2023 will definitely get a green light in 2026, because the organization that move first will compound an advantage over the others. So next is, what is, from like Gen A versus traditional analytics, right? Let me make this concrete with a comparison every analytics team in the room will recognize. So traditional analytics in a healthcare is like predefined SQL dashboards refreshed nightly, structured tables only, and an analyst spends 3 weeks building a cohort. The dashboard shifts, and by month two, underlying question has shifted, and the dashboard is already stale. So GenAI flips every row of this table. So the question, like open-ended, conversational, who in my Medicare Advantage population has uncontrolled hypertension and hasn't seen their PCP in 6 months, right? So that's a sentence in plain English, and it's not a Jira ticket or any other ticketing platform. So the data scope, structured plus clinical notes plus images. The 80% we couldn't reach in is now in scope. But time to insight, weeks become seconds, and not just for the analyst, the clinician, the care manager, the member services rep, they all get on demand reasoning. The bottleneck of the analyst in the loop disappears. So yeah, personalization moves from cohort level segmentation to patient level reasoning. Instead of diabetic woman over in 60 in the zip code, you get this specific person given their last A1C, the medication they switched off in March, and the social determinations we know about. Next is adaptability. So the reprompting and regrounding instead of re-engineering. So that's the productivity revolution behind the curtain. So output basically is the numbers, narrative, and the recommended action. So the question I get when I show this slide internally was like, doesn't this kill the analyst job? Honest answer: it kills the worst parts of the job, but the road dashboarding and amplifies the highest leverage parts like framing the question, judging the answer, owning the outcome. The analysts who lean in win. So yeah. So the next is like risk adjustment and HCC coding, right? I'll go with one use case here. So risk adjustment and HCC coding. If you are a payer or an ACO, so this is a bread and butter. Like quick setting up, right? A risk adjustment exists between Medicare and the ACA need to pay plans fairly for sicker populations. It depends on accurate documentation of every chronic condition each member has. So let's say miss a diagnosis in the chart and you under document the member's risk score, which means you basically are underpaid, and worse, the population looks healthier than it is, which wraps every downstream decision. So the four steps on the left are how this runs in production today. So basically, we ingest charts, notes, claims, and labs into a curated patient timeline. That ground step matters because every later answer has to point back to source. Then large language models extract candidates HCC with line level evidence. Patient has a CKD stage 3 isn't enough. We need the sentence in the note that supports it plus the date. So let's say in case of code reviews, ranked suggestions in their existing workflow, we do not replace coders, we make them 3 times faster. So finally, we submit, with an audit ready trace from every code back to the source text. So the right, if you look at the right panel, it is a real production numbers, like three times more conditions surfaced per chart, 60% reduction in coder review time, 100% of codes evidence linked, which makes RADA audits dramatically less stressful, and around 120 in recovered RF value per chart on average. So multiply that across a few million charts a year, and you understand why this case is usually the one that pays for the entire platform. So yeah, next the second use case I would like to bring here is a prior authorization. So because it is the most likely to make a clinician hug you, because that's prior authorization. So looking at the mental poll, is like who in this room has been on the phone with their insurance company this year about a prior auth? Some of you, are thinking about it right now. The patient experience here is famously broken, and the provider experience is worse. And clinicians spend roughly 2 business days a week on PA paperwork. So look at the before column, like faxed forms, rekeyed by hand, 14-day average turnaround. And another thing is like denials buried in policy, PDFs nobody can find, patients abandoning care plans because nobody comes back to them in time, and inconsistent decisions across reviewers. So now the after column, right? So with the agent assisted PA, we auto extract the clinical evidence directly from the notes. We match the policy criteria with citations. So the paragraph in the policy, the satisfied by this finding in the chart. So we draft the submission packet in seconds. So the reviewer's job becomes approving or editing, not rewriting from the scratch. So here, now patients can get answers the same day. So the bottom line is the headline: 70 to 90% reduction in PA cycle time on workflows re-engineered around GenAI. So this is not a marginal improvement; it's a different operating model altogether. So a subtle point, the value isn't A does the prior auth. The value is the shape of the work changes. So reviewer here basically gets the expertise and gets concreted on the cases that need judgment. So so here the patient who need a knee MRI doesn't have to call 3 times. that's a quality of life win for everyone in the system on a high level. So the third use case would be the member alignment, where this changes the conversations from more like, I would say, like from operations to people. So healthcare management for most members is generic, like generic outreach letters, generic schedule your screening, robocalls, generic chatbot answers that ignore your actual plan and your actual history. So most members tune it out, and the ones who need it most are majorly the older adults and non-English speakers, people with social barriers, because they tune it out fastest. So what GenAI is gonna help, let us flip that. So the scenario on the right is like care gap closure, which is nothing but instead of time for your mammogram, the message says your last screening was like 41 months ago. Your sister had breast cancer at 52, and your plan covers this at no cost. Like, here are three providers within 10 minutes of your home, specific, grounded in this member's data, written for that member's specific member. So the next is symptom triage. So a nurse line agent takes history, weighs red flags, and routes to the right level of care. So here with the full reasoning trees, the human nurse can review. So we don't replace the clinician at the moment of decision. We had them structured prep that saves 3 minutes of intake on every call. So benefits, what is the benefits navigation? So here it's like plain language questions, plain language answers, grounded in the actual plan and provided network. So multilingual by default, which matters more than the people admit, because non-English speaking members have systematically worse outcomes. So the next is chronic care coaching. So here is a funny thing, daily, not just that, adapt to recent biometrics and other ends. Like, let's say, like when a pattern drifts heart rate variability, missed doses, the system escalates to a human clinician. So always with a human in the right loop. So the metaphor I like is more like, we are trying to give every member the kind of attention a concierge medical practice gives its top 1%. So that's only possible because reasoning got cheap. And the next use case and the final use case is headies and quality measures. So this is like a reporting. This is where star ratings live, where billions of dollars in bonus payments are decided, and where most plans are leaving real performance on the table. So the visual on the left is deliberate, 90 plus measures reviewed continuously. That's the scale of the problem. Hedis is a single metric. It's like a nearly 100 different definitions, each within its own numerator, dominator, and exclusions, each updated every year. So even a well-run plan, the team that's responsible can deeply look at it like handful at a time. So GenAI changes that in four specific ways. The one is like gap detection. The system runs continuously across the membership, surfacing who is eligible, who is compliant, who is not, and who could be flipped with one outreach, not quarterly batch. So, and it's a live view as well. So, and the supplemental data extraction is more like it's the underrated one, because huge amounts of numerator eligible information are sitting in progress notes, lab PDFs, and discharge summaries that EHR field never captures. So LLMs read those and pull those evidences into the supplemental data feed. That alone can move measure several percentage points as well. So provider attestation drafts are the right form of the right measure, because the pre-populated with chart citations, and clinicians sign off, they don't fill out. So the submission assurance is basically it's validate code combinations and exclusions before file build. So you don't get rejections that cost a measurement year. The outcome the outcome line is what I would put in front of a CFO is like half star rating lifts and faster medical record review cycles. So in Medicare Advantage, a half star is the difference between a bonus year and a missed one. So moving on, the reference architecture. So let's open the hood. So this is a reference architecture that has held up across every healthcare grade GenAI systems I have worked on, like 6 layers top to bottom, each with a clear job. So the experience layer, the surfaces where humans meet the system. The temptation is basically to start here with a demo. Don't the user experience is the last layer to harden, not the first, because agentic reasoning layer is the planner, tools, memory, multi-step orchestration, and because this is where follower workflow lives. The next is like a a foundation model layer. So here, like the frontier LLMs, domain tuned models, RAG. So these are like critically plural, but never bet your stock on one model from one vendor. So route by task, easy queries to a cheaper model, ambiguous and high stakes queries to a frontier model. So cost discipline basically starts here, that I would say. So healthcare knowledge layer, clinical ontologies like ICD-10, CPTs, SNOMED, Alanic, this makes a generic LLM speak healthcare. Without it, you are asking polymath do nephrology with a Wikipedia tab open, which is kind of weird and funny. So a trusted data cloud is like this is like PHI secure, billions of medical events, the grounding source. If your retrieval is bad, nothing on top of it can save you. But about 70% of GenAI quality in my experience comes from this layer being right. So, and below it all, compliance and governance like HIPAA, high trust, audit, bias, monitoring, lineage. So, basically, it's the foundation, not a footstone. If the governance is bolted on at the end, every layer above it is rework waiting to happen. So the five design principles on the right are corollaries, like ground every answer, compose a don't monolith, eval first, cause discipline, observe everywhere, each deserves its own talk. So yeah, here comes the agentic AI. So yeah, let's zoom in a bit on agentic AI, specifically the part of the field moving fastest right now and the part that gets confused most often. So the diagram at the top is intentionally sample. It's a simple one. A user asks, an orchestrator decomposes the goal. The orchestrator picks tools, retrieval calculator, EHR APIs, and the LLM reasons over what it gets back. The result is delivered as an insight, not a guess. So the three concept tiles at the bottom are how I think about the agents in production. Plan, right? The first thing is a real agent does isn't generate text, it generates a plan. To answer this, I need to retrieve, let's say, a patient's last three encounters, check the formulary for these two medications, then compare against the protocol. So if a system goes straight from question to answer, it's not agentic, it's a one shot LLM with extra steps. So the tools are how agents get out of their own head. Instead of guessing whether a member is eligible for a benefit, the agent calls the eligibility API and gets the actual answer. So the fewer guesses, the fewer hallucinations. So reflect is basically this separates the production agents from demos. So after producing an answer, the system checks it. Did the retrieval return the right evidence? Does the recommendation conflict with anything in the chart? Should we hand off to a human? Reflection is what catches the long tail of edge cases that make demos look great and production look scary. So a warning: agents amplify whatever you give them. If your retrieval is bad, agents fail in more elaborate ways than a single LLM call would. So end the reasoning by earning the foundations first. So next is like evil driven development. So this is the most boring looking slide in the deck and the most important, I would say, because in healthcare, GenAI, you do not ship features, you ship features that pass evils. There is no other version that's safe. Walk across the following the upcoming funnel with me. Like stage one is like a golden set, right? For every prompt, every workflow, every endpoint, we maintain a curated, expert labeled set of examples. So building this is unglamorous, expensive, and the highest leverage investment a team can make. And the stage two is auto eval. So every prompt can change, every model swap, every retrieval tweak gets graded automatically before it merges. So we use LLM as judge for nuanced grading and deterministic rules for things like PHI containment. Now the third stage is shadow mode, where new prompts run in parallel with production, scoring on real traffic without affecting users. So the stage four is human review. Here is where like clinicians spot check edge cases. They are not a bottleneck. They are a calibration sensor. When their feedback diverges from auto eval, that's a signal to retrain the judge. And the stage five is promote behind a feature flag with a rollback measured in seconds, not days. So the four KPIs at the bottom are the only metrics that on every that matter on every change. So yeah, the faithfulness does the match does the answer match the cited source? If not, well, hallucinated. Like coverage, did we retrain the right evidence in the first place? Right? Safety, did we avoid clinical harm and PHL leakage? What about the utility? Like, did the human accept the suggestion as written or rewrite it? So the discipline of evil first is what lets a team ship weekly without fear, skip it, and you are one bad prompt away from a really uncomfortable Monday, I would say. So yeah, what are the business outcomes, right? Moving on. So let me put numbers in front of the people who pay for this. So yeah, so the chart on the left aggregates lift across pilots and production rollouts I have been part of are observed closely. So risk adjustments up 55% on condition surface, like prior up cycle times down like 78%, and code productivity up 60%, member engagement up 42%, and care gap closure up 38%. So these aren't like single experiment outliers. They are consistent across programs. Once a few engineering disciplines are in place, the ones we talked about, right? So where does that ROI come from? Four levels. So one, like coder and clinician hours saved. The biggest lever almost always time is the most expensive thing in the healthcare and the easiest to give back. So the second one is like recovered revenue from RAF accuracy, like risk adjustment alone can pay for the whole program at scale. The third one is avoided care leakage and redments. So closing the gap from insight to action means fewer bad outcomes, a lower cost of care, and the actuaries notice. So and the fourth one is higher member retention, like NPs lifts when the members feel seen, retention compounds. So the next one is a note on credibility, like mileage varies by program. That like 5 to 8x range is what I see in well executed programs. So have also seen failed deployments deliver zero. The difference is almost never the model. I would say it's the discipline of the team. The companies winning here aren't the ones with the best LLM access. They are the ones who instrumented evils and outcomes from the day one. Yeah. So next is moving to the responsible AI. Just a sec. Okay, the next is the responsible AI. So yeah, what is yeah? So responsible AI. The slide I would put first if I could. So in healthcare, useful is not enough. The bar is fair, the transparent, and private and accountable. So walk across four pillars. A fair model that's right on the average can still be wrong on the people who need it at most. So risk adjustment models trained on historical data, inherent historical inequalities, and yeah. Next is like transparency. Explain every decision with sources. If the system flags an HCC, the chat sentence is one click away. If member gets a coverage answer, the policy paragraph is right there. Black boxes don't pass clinical review, and they shouldn't. So next is privacy. HIPAA grade is the minimum, not the goal. Data minimization, tokenization at the boundary, re-identification controls. Accountability. So human in loop on every clinical decision, audit logs that aren't theater, they are queryable, reviewable, and they got reviewed. So yeah, the line at the bottom is the point I would write on a wall in this industry, like which is like equity is an engineering requirement, not a press release. Every team that has shipped responsibly into healthcare has internalized this. The team that haven't are the ones we read about for the wrong reasons. Next is like HIPAA privacy and governance. So let's get practical about how that responsibility shows up in the build. So the data minimization, it's like never send more PHI than the answer requires, like scope retrieval and prompt construction. So the model sees the smallest viable context, less data on the virus, less data to leak. And vendor and model risk reviews like BAS in place, data residency understood, no train guarantees in writing. Bias and fairness audits, these are not annual, they are quarterly, size sliced by population, published internally and externally where possible. Human in the loop, where it matters is the clinical decisions never auto execute, coding suggestions don't auto submit. The rule of the thumb, if the action affect a human's care or money, a human signs off. Full audit trail, every prompt, every retrieval, every stored queryable, reviewable. When the regulator calls, and one day they will, you can answer in hours, not in weeks. Okay, so yeah, adoption roadmap, uh, crawl, walk, or run, right? So what does the first year look like? Three phases: crawl, walk, run. So 90, 180, and 365 days. Crawl the first 90 days. Foundations, pick one workflow with the measurable cost, not three. Not your CEO's favorite idea, but the one where minutes of human time times million of events equals real money. So will you do that? Stand up PHI safe interface and retrieval, build the evil suit. Yes, before making any future work. So what is 90 to 180? It's a pilot, right? Production deployment with one team, one side, run side by side mode. The agent suggests, the human decides for as long as it takes to end the trust. Weekly outcomes with the clinicians and ops people in the room. Iterate prompts, retrieval, and UI ruthlessly based on what you see. So by the day 180, you should have your first ROI numbers, if even if they're scrappy though. So run days 185 to 365. So scale a multi-site rollout with a measurable KPIs, start the federated platform conversation, and your second and third use cases should reuse the rails, not rebuild from scratch. So here, establish an executive review board that owns the program. Otherwise, it will drift the moment leadership turns its attention elsewhere. So, crawl, walk, run is unfashionable advice. It's also the advice I keep being the right about. So, not just this. What are the lessons I learned? Right. So, here are some. So, lessons learned. So generally, there are five lessons I would say. Each came from being worse first. So what is anti-pattern one? Like demo-driven development, the polished demos gets executive buy-in, then production breaks because the evil was always looks good in the demo, but build fix is like build the evil first. It will feel slow. It will save your year. The next anti-pattern is treating the LLMs as the product. Like engineers fall in love with this model, then a better model ships and your stack is glued to the wrong one. So the product is the workflow. The model is one component swappable, ideally swappable behind a flag. The anti-pattern three is underestimating retrieval. So team pours effort into prompt engineering and ignore that what the model is being done. So about 70% of the quality comes from the retrieval. So spend accordingly. If your answers are bad, look at your context window before you blame the model. So next, the fourth anti-pattern is ignoring the cost early. So token spend compounds quietly. So by the time finance out notices, you have baked in expensive habits that are hard to unwind. So the next is the fifth anti-pattern is this. Yeah, excuse me. Uh, this is the one I feel more strong about, like skipping the clinician, but the temptation is to ship fast and ask the people who use it later don't like know from a nurse, beats a yes from benchmark. So co-design with the people who will actually live with this, so they will save you from your worst ideas and they will bring better ideas you would have never found. So these aren't comprehensive, they are the ones I wish someone had pulled me aside and warned me about like 3 4 years ago. I would say like 3 years ago. Yeah. So, yep, we are at the road ahead. I'm gonna make it a little quick here. So the 2026, because the timeline shows the journey from Transformer in 2017, GPT-3 in 2020, Enterprise GenAI in 2023, Agentic in 2025, healthcare transformation in 2026, and autonomous workflows by 2030. So in 2027 to 2028, workflow agents take real action, like with human approval, agents complete multi-step process end to end, eligibility appeal, scheduling, claim repair, right? So not I would say like AI does it, AI drafts, human approves, so AI executes it. And 2030 and beyond, population scale personalization, care plans, outreach cadence, benefits navigation, all adapt continuously to each member's evolving health history. So the plan you have at 50 isn't the plan you had at 30, because the plan listened to your last 5 years of data. So the next 4 years aren't speculation, they are like a deployment problem, I would say. So yeah, key takeaways are the if you remember five things to remember when you're back at your desk tomorrow or Monday, right? One is start with a workflow, not a model. Pick a use case where 5 minutes of human times millions of events equals real money. So two is ground everything, no retrieval, no answer. In a clinical setting, an answer without a source is a liability. So the third one is like build evils before you build features, right? So a prompt without a regression test is liability. So the fourth one is like keep humans in the right loops, like automate the toil, reserve judgment for clinicians, coders, and members themselves. So and the fifth one, measure outcomes, not output. So token generated is not a KPI. Models deployed is not a KPI. Care gaps closed, days saved, dollars recovered. Those are the KPIs. So if your dashboard doesn't ladder up to a number a CFO and a clinician both care about, build a different dashboard then. So if you do these five things, pick the right workflow, and you will be ahead of 90% of the teams that are trying to do this. So the technology is no longer the limit, the discipline is. Yeah, healthcare is hard, but healthcare with Gen AI is hard differently, but it also where the most consequential work in our industry will happen for the next decade. And I'm grateful to be part of it, and I'm grateful you spent this last say 35 45 minutes with me. So now yeah, I would like to thank everyone for being patient for last 45 minutes for this session, and I really appreciate all your all you guys for staying patiently and listening to me. And I'm open for any Q&A now. If you guys would like to go ahead.
Thank you so much, Pradeep. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can
Okay,
hear you.
excellent, excellent. I love the presentation. It aligned so well with a lot of the themes that we've heard over the course of the day. One of your points, one of your final takeaways, that concentrate on outcomes, not outputs. That means so much in healthcare, but that's where we started this morning. We started talking about that in our opening keynote. So you have reinforced a lot of the themes. The speakers just previous to you were talking about privacy and trust. Well, trust is a theme across all the tracks today, frankly. But thank you for this. Do we have any questions or counter arguments from the audience? All right, hand went up right away. I'm going to hand you the microphone just a minute, Uchenna.
Hello. I did have a question. Great presentation. You work in the healthcare field. Have you worked in or experienced or consulted with other areas? Because it seems like the healthcare field seems to have a very robust approach to handling AI and the like. Do you feel that's the case?
I had conversations with the people in different industries as well. For example, finance, right? So it was kind of overlapping, but yeah. But for example, let's say health. To answer your question, right? Healthcare and financial services are honestly the two most mature industries, I would say, when it comes to the AI governance, but for different reasons. So let me give you an example of financial services because they have been doing model risk management for decades. Like for example, SR 11 7 from the Federal Reserve has required a lot of banks to govern their models from like more than a decade, I believe now. But when the GenAI showed up, the banks already had model registries, validation teams, and challenger model frameworks, and couple other were ready. It's not hitting top of my head, but yeah. And one thing and also but at this point of time I would to answer your question, like you're absolutely right, healthcare is more mature over other industries, I would say.
Thank you, Pradeep.
Thank
I
you.
thought you might have a question. You have, and I think your name begins with a J. Joe, John? John, all right. John has a question. One moment.
Sure.
Hey, Pradeep. Sorry
Hey,
that you couldn't be here, but a really good presentation. Hey, would love to understand maybe a little more on your one slide. You were talking about kind of going from traditional analytics to Gen AI powered analytics and from predefined SQL to open-ended conversational. Would love to better appreciate like the kind of the structure behind that, just to double click into that a little further. Um, we see people wanting to explore it. Conversational analytics is an intent. Would love to hear how you guys have cracked the code on that, or is that something you're in the process of developing?
sure. Hey, John, that's a great question. Excellent question. So, I think you are referring to a paradigm shift table slide, right? So, yeah. Let me try to brief it. Like first is like semantic understanding. Like when a clinician asks, right, how are my diabetic patients trending this quarter? Right, the system translates that into which patients qualify as diabetic by what definition. Like let's say ICD-10 codes, right? Problem list, A1C thresholds, what's trending, so on and so forth. But yeah, so but next is like we do a retrieval, not a text to SQL. So a lot of vendors are pitching pure text to SQL. So we found that's a fragile in healthcare because the data model is too complex. So uh, excuse me. So we use retrieval over library of validated query patterns, like kind of like I would say like RAG, but for analytics. So the LLM picks a right pattern and parameterizes it and executes it. So that gives us the correctness and auditability. So the third one I would say is like a grounded synthesis. Like once we have the data back, the LLM doesn't just summarize. It produces narrative with citations back to the underlying numbers. And as I was mentioning earlier, the evil harness as well. So yeah, this is from a high level, but uh, yeah. Uh, does that answer your question, John?
Oh, one moment. He was nodding, but he wants the microphone back. So just a second.
Sure.
Thank you. The thing I was curious about was whether they were trying to, if you were truly trying to generate text to SQL, just to make sure I understood what you were describing, is it sounds like you almost have like query patterns that
Mhm.
it's really looking at that and decomposing their chat, looking at a query pattern and then executing that versus trying to build the SQL on the fly. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Pradeep. We are out of time today. We would have had great fun having you here, but we wish you well, and hopefully we'll get to meet you next year at the Data Summit.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to it.
All
And
right.
I promise that I wouldn't miss next year in person. So
Wonderful. All right. Thank you for the great information. Thanks to yes, clapping. Yes, we're